This country is worse than North Korea.
It started as an event about Eritrea.
Eritrean asylum seekers marched on the
Enforced lifelong military service, non-existent press freedom, a crippled economy, and complete hopelessness. It is one of the most brutal dictatorships in the world, but no one really talks about it. In many regards, including measures such as the Democracy Index and the World Press Freedom Index, the small nation located at the Horn of Africa closely competes with North Korea. Those escaping the repressive regime recount distressing and traumatic conditions within the country. But what has led a once hopeful country in East Africa to develop so negatively? Today we take a look at the fate of Eritrea, the country no one really talks about in the Western world, but it's often referred to as the North Korea of Africa. In contrast to many African nations, Eritrea's history diverged from a typical pattern of colonization by the British or French during the 19th century. Instead, it was the Italians who gradually expanded their influence and eventually establishing the colony of Eritrea officially in 1890. Prior to World War II, Italy even launched an invasion on the much larger Ethiopia from its Eritrean colony. Although Italy managed to occupy Ethiopia briefly, the consolidation of all colonies in the region resulted in the creation of Italian East Africa. However, Italian rule came to an end in 1941 when Allied forces defeated Italian troops in the region. Following this, the territory fell under British military administration until a lasting international solution could be agreed upon. Ultimately, it was decided that Eritrea and Ethiopia, then known as Abyssinia, would coexist as a united independent federal state. While this arrangement seemed promising on the surface, it would ultimately lead to disastrous consequences. Despite promises of autonomy, the Ethiopian emperor gradually stripped the Eritrean population of all political rights, eventually dissolving the Eritrean regional parliament. This fueled unrest amongst the population, leading to the Eritrean War of Independence, which lasted a total of 30 years. Over the course of this war, 100,000 soldiers and civilians lost their lives. Eventually, victory was achieved by the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, who campaigned for an independence plebiscite. This vote, conducted under UN supervision, saw an overwhelming 99% of voters express their desire for independence. Thus, the country became fully independent in 1993, marking a historical moment for the nation, and many hoped that everything would improve. The country adopted a democratic constitution, numerous parties were founded, and they aimed for a golden future. However, things turned out differently. The euphoria of independence soon gave way to the daunting task of nation building and governance. Eritrea adopted a constitution in 1997, promising democratic principles and human rights protections. However, the implementation of democratic institutions faltered, and political repression intensified under President Isaias Afwerki. Ongoing tensions with neighboring Ethiopia resulted in persistent border conflicts. The political landscape took a disastrous turn, primarily attributed to Isaias Afwerki, the leader of the People's Front for Democracy and Justice. He was initially appointed as interim president until the first elections, but in reality, there were no elections or any other democratic elements. He abolished all other parties immediately. And even 3 decades post-independence, even to this day, 30 years after independence, there has not been a single election in Eritrea. He openly admitted that he had no intention of holding elections for decades to come. In addition to political issues, the military service in Eritrea underwent a drastic change, extending from its original duration of 6 months to a lifelong commitment. Essentially, individuals are subject to forced labor indefinitely, a mandate that applies even to women. There is no room for refusal, and at times even school-age children are conscripted in the service. The military retains absolute authority, and the nation remains completely isolated, quashing any distant or external assistance. Widespread human rights abuses, including arbitrary killings, arrests, forced disappearances, torture, and severe restrictions on freedom of expression, religion, and assembly are prevalent. Eritrea has one of the highest proportions of citizens living outside the country, estimated at about 1/5 of the total population. Only through them does any information about the country reach the outside world. as the ruler tightly controls the flow of information. This is why so little is reported about the country. However, it is crucial not to overlook Eritrea and to shed light on the dictator's atrocities. Currently, there appears to be little hope for change in the foreseeable future. Eritrea's political situation remains highly repressive. President Afwerki's regime exerts tight control over all aspects of society, including the economy, media, and civil society. The absence of democratic governance and respect for human rights has led to widespread international condemnation and scrutiny. Eritrea faces a sea of challenges, including economic stagnation, youth unemployment, and mass immigration driven by political repression and lack of opportunities. Despite these challenges, Eritrea possesses immense potential for growth and prosperity. Its strategic location, natural resources, and resilient population provide a foundation for progress and resilience. However, meaningful change requires genuine political reform, respect for human rights, and inclusive governance. As Eritrea navigates its future, the international community must stand in solidarity with its people and support efforts to promote democracy, human rights, and sustainable development. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.